2 Thessalonians 3, 7 through 12. And I need a reader. Okay.
A reading from the second letter of St. Paul to the Thessalonians. Brothers and sisters, you know how one must imitate us. For we did not act in a disorderly way among you, nor did we eat food received free from anyone. On the contrary, in toil and drudgery, night and day we worked, so as not to burden any of you. Not that we do not have the right, rather, we wanted to present ourselves as a model for you, so that you might imitate us. In fact, we were with you. We instructed you that if anyone was unwilling to work, neither should that one eat. We hear that some are conducting themselves among you in a disorderly way, by not keeping busy, but minding the business of others. Such people we instruct and urge in the Lord Jesus Christ to work quietly and to eat their own food. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
This is pretty powerful.
Yeah, this is
I've
this.
heard this one.
Well, so what was going on is there was people that were abusing the faith, right? So they're basically being freeloaders, right? He's saying be busy, not a busybody. There's kind of a play on words that's intrinsic in here because that's what they were doing. They were taking advantage of other people's generosity, right? So people were generous and they're like, I don't have to work. I can just go get a free handout here. And so we're called to be people of industry, discipline, and we're also to have personal responsibility. So we're to be hardworking. And he's saying, act like we do, not as irresponsible busybodies, but rather as hardworking people. And so what did St. Benedict say? Pray and work, right? We're called to be praying and working. And that's what we just talked about, the one monastery. That's what they do. They work all day, just like the Trappists. They work all day. They work probably 12, 14 hours doing farming, putting caskets. Some of them do raise bees and honey and olive. They make their own olive oil. They do whatever it takes, but they work hard and they pray. They pray all day throughout. They'll stop and they'll go to prayers throughout the day and they'll work. And that's their life. And what is the devil's, so idle hands are what? The devil's workshop, right? So it's kind of important. So he's kind of pointing that out. He's saying, imitate us. We worked all day and preached all night. That's what he did. I mean, he would work all day building tents, making tents or structures, basically. And then at night, he would preach. And he'd preach so late, one person fell out of the window at one point, and died. It was like, oh, geez, hopefully I'm not that boring, It's like, sorry, St. Paul. But, it just went on late. And so he said, don't be a freeloader. And then he goes on, this is strong. If you don't work, you don't eat. That's strong, right? You don't work, you're not eating.
I think it's good.
It is. It's very important. And so when we look at our society now, we've built up a whole society where, people are encouraged. I mean, it's all, if I knew a guy and, I'm not going to mention his name, but he had, when they used to give out coupons and he could work, but he's like, I can make more. And he had a stack of food stamps that were at least a foot tall. He'd get them every week because he had 14 kids. And he was taking advantage of the system. And I'm like, you're a Christian. Is this right? What are you doing? And, he's like working this here and getting free food here. And I'm like, you can work. What are you doing, dude? And I had a few conversations with him. I'm praying for him, because he passed away. But, this is something that came to mind at that time. And it was like, this isn't right what you're doing. You're abusing the system. And so he's saying, imitate us, right? That's, we're working, we're doing this stuff. You're supposed to be imitating us. And so also don't be a busybody, getting into other people's business. Mind your business. Work, because living a life of quiet, humble labor honors God. And so we're called to be worker bees in a lot of ways, because that honors God. And, we're not to be a sluggard or lazy person. And we're supposed to have the diligence of an ant, or an uncle, but I mean like an ant, but so I think this is a pretty powerful, reading, and it's very corrective. And so he's correcting abuses. So Paul did that again and again. He started these churches, and then what did? They did, you'd have all this crazy stuff going on, in Corinth there was the worst crazy stuff going on, because that was like Las Vegas times 5. I mean, it was terrible. But here there was other kind of abuses. In another place, what were they doing? They were getting drunk on the wine, the Eucharistic wine. And so he was like, no, you're not to do any of this stuff. So a lot of what we have from St. Paul is correcting abuses that were happening. And that's good, right? Because we can see these abuses happening again and again over time. But you also see people abusing the generosity of somebody else. So, well, I don't have to work because you give me a free, meal or whatever. It's like, well, no, that's, you're called to, if you don't work, you don't eat. I mean, that's unless you're disabled, right? I mean, if you're disabled, that's a whole different thing. But there's people that just like, they know they can game the system and not work and make, do better off just by, getting it for somebody else is working.
It's sad.
So.
They do it though.